The first item we have tonight is a public presentation regarding the split lot at 5529 Maple, and that will be Mr. Brian Scott.
Okay, you will all remember that I brought to you probably back in May or so a lot split on Maple. This is right across the street. So it's kind of the same song and dance, different verse. This particular address is 5529 Maple. It's lot 58 of the Mission Hill Acres. And if you get the packet up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, pull it up. Great, thank you. There's one house sitting on the lot right now. It was built in the 1920s. It's been vacant for a few years. We actually saw the house for sale. We were kind of poking around the internet one day this summer and saw the house for sale. And the ad said, house for sale, possible lot split. So we called the realtor and said, what's going on? And kind of explained to him the process. And I think after kind of hearing me explain the process to him, you thought that a little bit more, you want to buy it off. So he wound up selling the property to Steve Clayton of Clayton Custom Homes. And he is now the owner of the lot. He has built quite a few homes in northeast Johnson County over the years. Kind of custom homes on situations like this, just a single lot here and there. So he is the applicant that is wanting to split the lot. And he wants to demolish the house and then build 2 new homes on the lot for sale. So, section 410010 of our zoning code states, any single-family dwelling constructed, reconstructed, or altered shall require a lot having a width of not less than 70 feet and an average depth of 110 feet, with the following exception. This is the exception that applied last time with the other lot. Any lot may be split to a minimum width of 60 feet and a depth of 110 feet if it complements the overall character of the adjacent neighborhood. In considering the application for a lot split to a width of less than 70 feet, the lot width of any newly created lot may not be less than 75% of the average front lot width of lots within the subject property block. So we looked at the entire block defined by Maple along the west, 56th Street along the south, Knoll Avenue along the east, and those lots along Knoll are actually in Roland Drive, not in Mission, and then 55th Street on the north. And you'll see in the packet that every one of those lots, with the exception of this one, is 60 feet wide. So if you apply that rule, you come up with an average of 47 feet. This lot split would actually result in 2 lots being 62.5 feet wide, 140 feet deep. So it does comply with the exception of that zoning ordinance. And that's really about it. The Planning Commission did hear this at a public hearing. There was one resident who spoke in favor of this. He thought that the new homes would be a nice addition to the neighborhood, and they did approve it 9-0, recommend to you all for approval.
I think it's fantastic. The only concern I have is the last time I went by the house, some of it's boarded up, like the front door, and, with plywood, and some of the windows, and I just don't think that looks very attractive.
He was actually in today to pull a building demolition permit.
Okay.
So that's probably where he's at right now.
Okay, that's perfect. And so we assume he's going to start demo then fairly soon?
As soon as it's approved, yeah, within probably the month or so.
Okay, perfect.
And he's got all his utilities cut already, and so, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, Brent.
So this is just information only, we don't need to do it.
Correct.
We're going to vote on it at the City Council next week.
You'll hear this presentation here next week.
All right.
Any other questions for Brian? All right, thank you, Brian. The next item is informational only. Laura Smith, and it will be in regards to the review of the alternatives for the Hodges planters.
Yes, thank you. As you know, over the last several months, we've been engaged in conversations regarding the planters that are along Hodges Drive at 61st Terrace and Juniper and 62nd Street and 62nd Terrace. We did have first let me back up. So we sent a letter to the neighborhood in August. We hadn't had a public conversation about the planters since the mid-90s or so. We sent a letter kind of expressing some of the concerns that the city had, from our perspective, after one of the planters was damaged earlier in 2018, and really the point was to say, is the neighborhood still as passionate about the planters as they have been in previous conversations? And the answer is a resounding yes, both from the response to that letter, written information that was provided to staff and to the council, and then following a public meeting that we held on the 29th of November with, I would say, probably 45 plus folks in attendance. And really the purpose of that meeting was to just make sure we had received lots of written documentation, phone calls, email, a variety of other things. I know many of you had been contacted by residents in the area. But we wanted to just confirm again, in kind of that more face-to-face setting, that we understood and give the residents the opportunity to share with us their questions, their feelings about the planters, which they did, and it was very beneficial. I think there were some things in terms of traffic flow and traffic patterns in the area that we weren't aware of. And so what we said was that we would kind of continue that conversation and look. One of the things that we expressed at that meeting on the 29th was a concern that the planters, as they exist today, don't meet national highway safety standards from a crash worthiness standpoint. And there were some questions at that meeting about what does that really mean. This evening I'm going to ask Dave Menninga with GBA, who was the city's on-call traffic engineer, to share with you a little bit more kind of what that means and how that will be factored into our considerations as we move forward. We haven't come up with any alternatives. Following that meeting on November 29th, we reached out to GBA. We've had a meeting and some back and forth email correspondence, just really asking them, kind of bringing Dave up to speed on the situation, history, what does it look like, what has the response been so far, and what do we look at in terms of just kind of scope and a process for moving the conversation forward. So, you know, one of the things that we've heard is that perhaps the neighborhood feels like there's a sense of urgency from City Hall to take the planters out. And I think any sense of urgency on our part is really coming from the fact that we started this conversation back in August. We obviously touched on a very emotional subject for the neighborhood, and we want to continue that and see that through without delays. As we talked about before, and in November we've had some staff changes, and so that has caused some delays. But the purpose of tonight is to really kind of share with you that explanation of why we have concerns about the current planters. We have committed to and continue to commit to the planters will not come out or be modified without neighborhood involvement. One of the things that I'd like to leave this evening with is if there are residents, I think there are residents here in attendance, if there are people that the neighborhood would like to designate to work with us as we move forward and look at solutions, that would certainly be helpful from our perspective as well. But to then sort of lay that out and really just talk about the process. We don't have specific alternatives. There's a whole long list and wide range of options and alternatives that we will be able to consider, both from a design and a cost perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave to kind of share a little bit more of the technical aspect or information, and then certainly open it up for questions.
Good evening. I really just want to start by saying so far that, like Laura said, we've really just been kind of in an information gathering mode. You know, just getting up to speed on the project and getting familiar with kind of the way things have transpired over, it sounds like, a number of decades, and kind of how we got to where we are today. So really, I think the technical information that I'll bring to bear as part of the ongoing discussion is related to the traffic safety, traffic calming within the neighborhoods. I've done quite a bit of work throughout the KC metro area with various neighborhoods, and I think we've got a good history of like she said, working with neighborhood advisory groups to represent the neighborhood. You know, I will commit, like she said, there's a wide variety of things that we can do, from traffic control devices that are essentially temporary in nature, to things that are more rigid, like guardrails, I guess, that maybe were in place at one time, to other, you know, completely aesthetic treatments that will, you know, maintain that, you know, that closure, I'm going to say, of the three roads. But there's ways to mitigate that so that maybe some of the city's concerns about snow plows, emergency access, even your trash trucks. There might be ways to accommodate in a limited fashion those types of vehicles without opening the roads to public travel. So I think that's where we're headed from the process and how we'll be involved. When she talks about the crash worthiness, and I don't want to over-engineer things up here, but there are a series of different documents that come down from the Federal Highway Administration, the Department of Transportation's, both at the federal and the state level. I was able to give Laura some of that information earlier this week regarding several of the documents that are kind of guiding principles, especially in terms of roadside safety and the design of buffer zones and those kinds of treatments that we allow to be within the buffer zone. I think when you drive around town, just anybody that's in their car notices all the signs, all the street lights, all those kinds of things that are within a certain distance of the roadway are all frangible. They're all on breakaway bases. And so when we talk about the crash worthiness, especially of the one that has been hit, you can tell that it sustained a pretty good impact to create the damage that it did have. Personally, I believe that it was some sort of out of control, whether that was inattention or asleep or drunk or whatever it was. Somebody hit that because of the road curvature. So that one in particular, I saw was kind of the first. It doesn't surprise me that that was the first one to sustain it. So I think we have a lot of options, like she said, that we can consider. But we're going to be looking for things that improve the traffic safety, both from the way that they're hit, how they will minimize the damage that is potentially done, not to vehicles. I'm not that concerned with the property damage side of things, but especially occupants and injuries and those kinds of issues are really where we focus. But things like reflectivity and other things that are just missing with the planters. They just, I drove up there actually this evening. It's obviously dark and, I could kind of see what was going on. But if they're not illuminated by the headlights or if the person's not paying attention, there's certainly a hazard essentially within intersections that look like they've been constructed to handle turning maneuvers. Really, these are objects within what I would say is a normal space of a traveling vehicle. So I think that's the issue, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have about those items. Yes, sir?
In terms of options, can you talk a little bit more about the aesthetic options that allow for traffic movement of utility trucks and so forth that have permission to do it versus?
Right, and I think there are a couple different things. Some of them are, a little more restrictive than others, in terms of having crash gates and those kinds of things that would be impacted by an emergency vehicle only when needed. Obviously, they would then incur some sort of maintenance or repair feature from the city to put those back. But for instance, one of the things that I brought to the first informational meeting that we had, there are pavers. Essentially, if the curb lines were kind of modified to make it appear that there was a grass strip that was continuous, there are pavers that could be put under that would take the load of those trucks and potentially allow fire trucks, even the trash and plow trucks, to go over that. But to the driver on Hodges and to the vehicles, to the east, it would appear to be a cul-de-sac or at least a dead-end street with a curb across it. But there are things that we can do to support the traffic that would allow the weight of those vehicles to safely, get over the curbs.
Do you look at signage and all around there in terms of going into those dead-end areas?
Well, one of the other guides that we do rely on daily as traffic engineers is called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. If you would go find another dead-end street or something, you're going to see a series of signs across there, or it's going to be a guardrail or something. It's those kinds of permanent treatments that have been properly crash tested. They're placed according to the standards, and those kinds of things are I think what drivers expect. That's what that document is meant to do, is to make sure that cities and jurisdictions across the country treat their roadways in a consistent manner that a driver can understand and comprehend what is being asked of them. So I think there are things that can be done. Along Hodges itself, I think with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, as long as people are adhering to that, the buffer zone is a relatively limited number, probably something like 6 feet. So the planters themselves right now, I would say, are probably outside of the actual physical buffer zone, but as a rigid or semi-rigid, I would say, they obviously kind of got disintegrated upon impact, at least the one. You know, they're just not crash worthy in the way that we either want them to break away or to be like a guardrail or something that would redirect them back onto the roadway. They're kind of in a middle ground that's just not satisfying either one of those criteria.
Do you have any thoughts about, first of all, a limited traffic study that we could get an idea of traffic patterns that exist there now?
Laura and I did talk about that, or staff, you know, we talked about that in our initial meeting. I offered one thing which would be of limited value, I think, at this point. It would really transpire to be more of a before condition in case you did change anything. And that would be to take some traffic counts around the neighborhood on the different roads that do provide access. Again, really, that's a limited value because unless you open up those roads, you're not going to see what the traffic change is. But that would just be, if you're preparing to do that, I would want to do that and have a baseline as to how the traffic pattern is shifting. As we talk about various traffic calming options, really where you're at with full closures is at a very nearly zero cut-through situation. The traffic on those streets is generated mostly by those residents and visitors to those particular houses. As soon as you open it up, there will be somebody that would choose that route during congestion, during some sort of different event. That's hard to quantify because it hasn't existed for 50 years. So the one thing that we did talk about, just a very limited thing, would be to take traffic counts on the north and south ends of Hodges, just to establish, because I don't think anybody truly knows how much traffic is on that roadway on a daily basis. So in the interest of saving the city some money, we did talk about doing just a few limited counts. But I think a full-blown traffic study, it's more about the options, I think, rather than the traffic volumes themselves.
Do you have any baseline data on emergency vehicles getting through there? That's my biggest concern, because I want to balance what the needs and the wants of the community and the neighbors are with severe concerns about emergency vehicles getting in and around. And does Johnson County, do all the peripheral areas have a knowledge base of those streets that are closed and where they have to go to get in if they're on a split-second decision as to saving somebody's life?
I personally can't answer that. I would either default to the staff or possibly even the police chief here.
I'd be happy to discuss that. So I've been here for 21 years, and there's been planters, barricades, and everything that whole time. And I understand. I live on a cul-de-sac out in Shawnee, and I understand living on a dead end. My police cars don't have any problem getting to your houses right now. I will tell you that if your house is on fire, or if somebody in your family is having a heart attack, if the fastest way for me to get there is to cut through somebody's yard real quick, I'll apologize now, go around the planter, that's what I will do. Now hold on. I get it, because again, that's why I bought a house on a cul-de-sac. The fire truck can't do that. If your house is on fire, and I've been in a couple of houses that have been on fire because I thought people were in there and the fire department told me that's a bad idea. It will take the fire department longer to get to your house. And seeing those fires, I have been at fatality fires, and those are not pleasant. And if it's your house or your family member, you want the fire department to get there as quickly as they can. Now, in 21 years I've been here, it hasn't happened. But if it's your house, one of these days something's going to happen. Can't put speed bumps and stuff up there because it messes up the plows on the trucks. The fire truck has to stop. Our police cars gives us a little bump, and that's about it. But the fire truck and medic and everything, because of all the equipment and the canisters that they have to come to a complete stop. So that's why when people ask about speed bumps, we can't do that. When you look at, because I've driven up and down all those streets, when you look at it and it's just a square towards the end, fire trucks, they need to be able to turn around and go out the way they came in, facing the right way. They cannot do that on your streets. The fire chief would tell you the same thing if he was here tonight. Now, there are other spots in this city where it is a giant circle at the end. If you go up off of Riggs, in the 5100 block, there is a giant circle down there, and they have to back the fire truck up about 3 or 4 times so that they can get facing the right way to get out. But right now, the fire truck has to back all the way back up the street. Your trash truck probably has to do the same thing too, unless they're pulling up into somebody's front yard, which... Right. So I would tell you that the reason that the city can't fix those planters is it violates the same rules that we're talking about here. That's why the city can't go back and fix that. Again, there's got to be a happy medium somewhere. I don't want somebody getting caught in a house fire or having a heart attack and us not being able to save them because every one of our cars has one of those AEDs in it. I want to be able to save you if it's your house or one of your relatives. And I don't want somebody to die because of planters. Again, I'll cut through your front yard, but the fire truck and the ambulance will not do that. It will take them extra time to get to your house. So, but I do understand, again, I live in a cul-de-sac, so I get it. But there's a cost that can come with that.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question in regards to?
Either one.
I was going to ask you, how would you get into a gated community?
So we have that right now. Kennett Place up off of Charmers Parkway in Lamar is gated. And there's one way to get in there, and we actually have a code to get in.
Why couldn't they put a gate there that does the same thing as a gate?
I would tell you
You could. I think that's certainly, I mean, gated access or code access is one of the things that we're looking at. And I think that certainly the public safety concerns, it's premature, I think, at this point until we have some options that we want to bring forward. But when we have identified and narrowed some of those options, we will certainly bring the fire department and other emergency services personnel to the table to weigh in on those. I don't want to put 25 options in front of them and ask them to, to evaluate each one. But certainly as we can narrow that focus, we can bring that feedback and pros and cons from all of those perspectives.
Could Dave give us an idea of like cost of a range, I guess?
No, we're not that far in the process. So I mean, anything that we're going to say in terms of cost or specific options, we haven't been able to spend the time and really delve into that. So I'm very hesitant to do that because it is such an emotional issue for the for the neighborhood, and I don't want to throw things out that we aren't really going to realistically consider over the next several months.
Laura, Laura, it sounds like originally just the removal was an option. Is that still an option on the table, or is it replacement strictly at this point, or what kind of?
I mean, I think that's ultimately the decision of the city council.
Yeah.
But we are basing it, and I mean, removal will be could be one option. But I think from what we've heard and the feedback from the neighborhood, we certainly heard that wasn't the preferred option from their perspective. So that's why we want to spend that time with that. So what I would encourage is that I think as Dave and I have been talking, I think that if we could spend some time really delving into those options, incorporate some folks from the neighborhood who might be interested in participating in that process, we could probably come back to you all in a couple of months. So I would say March would be a realistic time frame that we would be able to at least come back and start to present some options, or then answer some of these questions if you want to send us back to the drawing board for more information.
Can I ask another question? With regards to the area, I think historically there's been a homes association in that area. I don't know if it's active or not. And I know Lido Village is probably a homes association, is it not?
So I know Lido Village has at least 2, if not 3, separate homes association. I don't know if there's anybody here.
Not now.
Not now? Okay.
They have them.
Because I'm wondering if there's a formal organization in the neighborhood that could represent the neighborhood.
I don't know I don't, do you have a?
I'm not aware of one.
Yeah, I don't think there's an organized HOA in that area.
So did the neighborhood want to go ahead and determine a couple of folks to represent? I mean, this evening, do we want to name those, or?
Sure, or if they want to have an opportunity to discuss that and then share those names and contact information, with me.
So we email you?
Absolutely, and I think we've built an email list from everybody that we've had from either the email correspondence, the petitions or letters that you signed, or the sign-in sheet that we had at the November meeting. So we can continue to build on that. If you don't want to be a part of that list going forward, we can take your name off of that as well. But the more we can do to kind of build that contact database, we sent a specific mailing to residences for the November 29th meeting because that was a little bit of a different, public forum. Going forward, I anticipate that we will be, on scheduled city council agendas. And so if we can help get the word out without doing a formal mailing every time, that's probably a good way to do it. If we feel like we need to do a formal mailing, we can consider that as well.
It would also be good to encourage the neighborhood to select individuals that would represent multiple views of what the community wants, rather than just a single view. So I would encourage you to think about who might represent opposing views on the issue, so that there's a balance that's brought to our...
Maybe like one person from Lido Villas, one person from one.
Well, I don't know.
street, or-
You know the neighborhood better than we do. But certainly getting some representation that
Sure.
is not just one side.
Kim, can I just say something?
Yes.
I've been around the neighborhood and collected, I wasn't out recruiting people. And you
Right.
can see from the meeting, everybody there was very adamant about
Right.
the way they feel. So it wasn't trying to persuade people to present, it's just that's our view. So naturally, that's our view. And I would volunteer to work with Mr. Traffic Engineer.
As would I, Susan.
Mr. Chairman.
I would volunteer with you.
I was curious, because I didn't notice if your email that you sent out had everybody else's emails on it.
I blind copied it because I didn't have your permission to share your email addresses with everyone else, and so I chose to blind copy. And so if you're
I just
comfortable
thought it would be
circulating,
easier for us to be in contact with.
yes, and I can certainly, if we designate some neighborhood representatives, can share that. But that was my hesitation.
Yeah, I understand.
In doing that.
That makes
So.
perfect sense.
I have a couple of quick questions. So those streets have never been open to traffic. Right?
Correct.
And I guess the other thing that I would want some info on is what kind of potential liability would the city have if something happened in the current state? We've been told that those planners aren't compliant with traffic safety standards, but what could that potentially mean for the city? And how do we work to find some middle ground with something that is compliant and won't put the city in a spot where we can run with?
Right, and those are the kinds of things that we'll be exploring. It's kind of balancing what is that investment in whatever a design solution or alternative would be against some of those liability concerns.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a couple of representatives from the neighborhood.
At least, and I think certainly, we could accommodate maybe three to five is probably a good number, so if there are others, but.
Ron's son, Adam, would be an excellent addition because he does that kind of work. He knows all those regulations. He's sketched it.
Right.
I think I have Adam's sketch in my folder from the
Okay.
November meeting and contact information. So I'll follow up, and Susie, if I might just follow up with you tomorrow, and then we'll kind of work on collecting who those representatives will be and get some dates, meeting dates, and timelines set. Okay?
Thank you, Dan.
All right, great, thank you. It sounds like we've got a good plan going forward. All right, the next item we have is an action item, actually. I got wrapped up in that. Thank you very much. Okay, Overland Park Interlocal Agreement for the Lamar chip seal, and that will be Mr. Brent.
Thank you. So, as most of you know, we entered into the interlocal agreement with Overland Park last year from basically Kenneth Place to 67th Street, and that was chip seal, some full depth patching, and also crack seal application for the chip seal. They hesitated on the piece from Kenneth Place towards Shawnee Mission Parkway with the KDOT project that happened in 2018 with the mill and overlay. So they were trying to finish that chip seal intersection from Kenneth Place to Shawnee Mission Parkway, also with striping and bike sharrows, and just finishing that project. So they held off because of the KDOT project, and they probably destroyed that chip seal with all the big trucks and the paver and everything coming through. So they are asking us to enter into the interlocal agreement for 2019. It's basically 650 feet of roadway, striping, thermoplastic, And the estimated cost is $18,546.12. They are bidding it right now with their chip seal program, so that is just an estimated cost. If it exceeds that amount, we will have a chance to come back to it and talk about it again. But with the amount of chip seal they do in their street program, they're usually pretty close on their numbers for the mileage, lane mileage of chip seal they do. So I would say it would stick right around that number. But with that, any questions or comments? Or
The only question I've got is, if they go to council, it would have that number attached to it, but it could vary from that, you're saying, so
So there would be a not to exceed, so we would include this as a not
make
to
a
exceed.
5% not to exceed or something?
I think we would just put this as a not to exceed, and then if their numbers come back, we'll come back with the revised contract amount to the council.
Okay.
Go ahead and move this forward and after that gets set.
I was
Brent,
thinking so.
sorry, I have a quick question
Yes.
regarding the chip seal. I've noticed Overland Park's chip seal is a little bit different than the chip seal we've done. It's has like a red tint to it
Yes.
almost. So will it be that Overland Park chip seal that
Yes.
we use, not what we use? I know they're administering. I'm curious. I like the look of the red tint. So
That's for the chiefs.
yeah, there you go.
I mean, I would say, I can't guarantee that for sure, because sometimes it's on the product availability of where they're getting the actual rock from. So there are a few choices, but from what I've seen most with Overland Park, that's what they're using. So I would say they're going to try to match what they laid down last year, so it all looks the same.
Do you want to come up here and state what city you're from, please? Oh, okay.
Josh Stevie, 5911 Reeds Road. Had a couple comments on this. I know that we're doing some great work on Lamar coming up with the bike lanes and some of the complete streets and the safe process school that's going on. Is this something we're going to tell over the park that they should continue as we go up Lamar, since
I think it
Just
will
share
have
the street.
bike, won't it?
We'll have Cheryl.
Sharrows, I would say when you get to what you're talking about, it's more about full reconstruction and adding sidewalks. So right now, they're just trying to maintain what they got, and that's kind of the chip seal application. So as that street moves forward with, full depth reconstruction, stormwater stuff, I'm assuming that's when that conversation would be had.
Sure.
Adding sidewalks and making it more walkable.
that's great. I knew there would be some repainting along with the chips. So
Yeah, we're doing the bike sharrows, but usually when you're talking about the walkability and all that happening, it's when you get into the full reconstruction part of it. So right now, it's just kind of a paint and maintenance part.
All right, thank you.
Good question.
So we determined we'll go on the consent agenda? Okay, very good, thank you. All right, the next item is an action item. It will be Operation Greenlight, and again, we need Mr. Brent.
Thank you very much. So we've been participating in Operation Greenlight, or OGL, since 2010. They monitor our traffic signals on Shawnee Mission Parkway and Lamar, Shawnee Mission Parkway and Knoll, and Shawnee Mission Parkway and Roland Drive. They are managed by Mid-American Regional Council, or MARC. They operate around 705 traffic signals between us and Kansas and Missouri. What their main goal is during rush hours, they can control them traffic signals. It helps me out. They can tell when they're broke down, and they can call our traffic service people to come out in the middle of the night. They don't have to contact me, so they have all that information. They monitor the loops. Since KDOT milled and overlaid Shawnee Mission Parkway, we also installed advanced loops on some of those traffic signals that could handle that software. So they can even chase traffic farther back to see patterns. It also helps with pollution, keeping traffic moving and not leaving cars idle and stalled. It's a pretty relatively low cost. It actually went down for the 2019 and 2020 year. The OGL steering committee lowered the cost from 800 per signal to 600, so the actual cost went from 4,400 to 3,300, so there is a savings there. And all the other local agencies also participate in this program, so it's mainly for highways, main thoroughfares. That's a great program. They do a great job keeping me informed with everything. like to see us continue to participate in the Operation Greenlight program.
So this covers primarily Shawnee Mission Parkway.
I mean, that's all it covers, really.
Intersection.
3 lights.
Does it cover any north-south, like over 18th Street to go?
I mean, I'd have to do some research on that. I mean, I'm only familiar with what we're part of. I do have all that information I can pass along to you, but I didn't dig into like all the other cities and who participates in which traffic signal.
And we can send you, there's a link on the MARC website
Okay,
that,
good.
for the Operation Greenlight Steering Committee, and it's got more information than you would ever want to read about all of the 700 and plus traffic signals.
I'd say we go ahead.
I guess I didn't know this.
Oh, well, here we go.
I didn't know this was on the agenda, but I'll throw it out that, you know, GBA actually did the OGL corridor for Shawnee Mission, so it actually started at Flum and it ends at Roland Drive.
Okay.
And that's before you, of course, go across the bridge and the speeds change, and those signals are, actually, I believe they're untimed. There's been some talk of getting those added, but that's generally what they do. That's the point of OGL, is to be across jurisdictional lines so that a uniform timing plan is developed. And it's mainly, like he said, for event management. You know, if something's, you know, Shawnee Mission is a route that somebody's going to take. If there's a crash on I-35, they might come down Row and try to go across and then get back on at I-35. Those are the kinds of roads they try to do. But actually, our firm did the timings for those that are on there right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad.
There you go.
I would recommend you put this on.
Consent. And I'd like to go ahead and ask the folks that are visiting in the background if they can step outside in the hallway so we can listen to be respectful to the speakers up here, please.
Susie.
All right, the next item we have is the cars, Interlocal, Broadmoor to Johnson Drive to Martway. And then Mr. Brent Morton.
Thank you very much. This is kind of the last step with Johnson County Cars to get the funding for the project. By entering into this agreement with the CARS program, it specifies the county participating in funding this project. They fund 50% of the project's construction costs and inspection costs, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocates, that stuff we're kind of on the hook for. But it's a great program, but I'm sure you all know, funding-wise, it funds most of our projects or major thoroughfares. So they're funding this project at $453,000, not to exceed $453,000. This is kind of, yeah, like I said, kind of the final step with the county. Staff is working on getting the right-of-way easement acquisition stuff together. Olson is completing final documentation to get the project out the door. Once we acquire the easement acquisition, most of all those documents are put together. So if everything moves forward, hopefully early spring we'll have bids back and we can get this project started. I know most of you probably realize that we've already started on utility relocates, water ones out there working. So the ball is rolling, but this just kind of designated those funds from the county to us to make sure this project moves forward. So
When are you going to start asking for easement?
we are about 30 days out from that. 30 to 40 days. The process is rolling right now. It's to the, we're working on getting the documents back for the easement acquisitions and appraisals are coming back. So.
Any additional feedback from the businesses along there since we got our meetings?
We went and talked to everybody last week, and they were pretty on board with what we're trying to do out there. I know we made some adjustments to the project. I wasn't around for the first design, so, well, I was, but wasn't part of it, I guess. And we talked with all the business owners. Some of the property owners we weren't able to discuss it with, but we did discuss it with their staff, and it seems like everybody's pretty much on board with the project and understand the scope of it. They asked about the days. Once it gets started, it's probably a 120-day project, close to it, because we're redoing the traffic signal on Johnson Drive, so that's a big ticket item that kind of drags that project out a little bit for the lead time. But most everybody we talked to is on board, so I think it's going to hopefully run pretty smooth.
Kristin and I have not heard from anybody that's why.
Me either, so that's a good thing.
You know, I think we
Yes.
saw great success with Johnson Drive with having kind of that, you know, presence and being able to speak to people face to face. And I know you, Emily and Brent, spent close to 6 hours total last week, you know, in and out of those businesses.
Yeah, I really
answering
appreciate you guys
questions.
taking the time. I think it really helped that we also had community meetings as well. I think that's really effective.
We have an email list built with the property owners and, you know, we're adding to it that, you know, so we did like a kickoff email and, you know, forward
Can
this.
you add us to that list, please?
Great, thank
I think
you.
we should take that to council and give Brent something else to talk about.
I think it should be non-consent, it's a great
Non-consent.
project. All right, we've got Brent again.
All right.
And this is in regards to the stormwater repairs at 50th and Dearborn.
And take one back.
Yeah, this just kind of helps what we're talking about. It's kind of just a small map I made in the office today. I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but we had some corrugated metal pipe fail on the 50th and Dearborn. And it is, sorry about that. I got it. 5028 Dearborn, that's where the pipe collapsed in the residence driveway. Right now we got steel plates on it, and the reason the scope of this project kind of escalated from there, those are both dead-end streets, and it's all CMP pipe run through that neighborhood. It's all the same age or older. I contacted GBR on-call engineers and discussed it with them. And kind of what's driving expanding this project is it's a one-way in, one-way out. So when that corrugated metal pipe fails, if it does on a huge rainstorm, people aren't going to be able to get in and out. So if we can expand the scope, get the stuff underground, and add a storm box and a slip line, I'll talk about in a second. The crossing on West 50th Street. I think we're going to do the city and the residents a great thing. Potentially what could happen if it fails on them and they get stuck back there or can't get home. So what I kind of highlighted out here is the purple is kind of what's existing there and is failing. The box areas where it's failed as of right now is steel plated. The green is what we're trying to add. It's open channel right now, or open ditch line, so we are trying to bury that ditch, enclose that in storm sewer pipe, all the way to the creek channel by adding curb two and getting that stuff underground, so we're not, we just milled and overlaid that road, I think a couple years ago. So by adding curb, you're extending the life of that road too, by not letting it push out into the ditch line. And then the slip lining, we did that on Fox Ridge, and it's just going to be a bit alternate, kind of. Who's got the appetite for it. I think it's a great solution to not shutting that road down. And that it's snap type pipes, the brand. There's a couple brands, but I mean it's almost got a 100-year shelf life on it. So I mean once you install it, and the only reason I've talked to some of the people that use it, the only reason they put a 100-year shelf life on it is it hadn't been around long enough, so they can't guarantee it past that point. So
the pipes that are connecting to it, what are the ages of the pipes that are line?
20 plus years. So
Have we checked them at all? I mean, we're not going to spend money and do all this great work on one set of pipes and then the one.
So
You can't slip line if the condition of the pipe is, the condition of the pipe has to be at a certain level to even take that treatment.
Okay.
So.
and it's got a good starting and stopping point. So it's a curb line to the existing storm box on Dearborn. So we're starting at the existing storm box and then taking it all the way to the creek channel. So we got a good starting and stopping point where we're, not patching anything. It's all new infrastructure.
The reason I asked, 15 years ago, this site flooded.
Yes.
And there was concerns on hand relative to liability where the city came in and where private property owners were involved. And it was a real big deal at the time. It backed up in somebody's yard and it was a big mess. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah. And
Was it in this section?
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually talked to the homeowner and he discussed that with me. So the quicker we can get that water underground, and right now it's got a 90 under West 50th Street, which is really not what you want in storm sewers. I mean, it collects everything, stops there, trees, leaves, everything, so that's kind of what backs it up to. So I think moving forward, if we can get it okay to move this project forward, I think it's going to be a great add to the neighborhood. Adding curb line and getting water underground
That will
is
look
always
really nice.
And with the slip line, if we go that route too, it leaves the road open. Since there's only one way in and out, it's really relatively, I wouldn't say not invasive, but not as bad. So you can still get home after work, and you know, it's a good quality product for sure, long shelf life. So.
Brent, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So this is my street. So I'd be one of those people that were blocked from
She
being
probably
able, I wouldn't
wouldn't be
make
able
it
to
to
get home.
council, yes. But first of all, the resident that this happened to said that Public Works has been fantastic, and you guys did a really, really great job. So they're very, very appreciative to what you guys have done, first of all. Second of all, I'm curious, mainly because this entire neighborhood, mine included, we're all in septic systems. So I'm curious as to, because part of the reason that we don't have curbs apparently in that neighborhood is because of septic systems existing in people's front yards. So my question is, are we at all concerned about adding curb lines there to that section because of the unknowns of some of these houses that were built a long time ago? And really, it's only, from what I can see, 3 houses that are affected, but are we going to do some assessment as far as where their septic lines are?
I will definitely touch base with the engineers and let them know about that. I really didn't know that that was an issue with the septic systems and adding curbs. So, I mean, those houses are pretty far back off the property line.
Right.
So I think we'll be all right, especially adding curb where it's already open ditch line and we're, you know, trying to get the stuff underground. But I would definitely discuss it with them and make sure we're not making anything worse.
Historically, folks on Dearborn have felt somewhat neglected. I was excited to see the chip seal happen last year, which it didn't take the way that it was supposed to, which that happens. But I'm a little nervous only because adding curb line here, the rest of the folks on Dearborn who haven't had curbs or really a lot of maintenance back there in the previous years may say, I want curbs too. Everybody wants curbs, everybody wants sidewalks, of course.
I totally understand that. I guess the best way to word it right now is the CMP's failed. We're starting from the start point of it and we're ending at the creek channel. It's the steepest part of that neighborhood, so we're just trying to collect that water and get it to the creek channel. Curbs are always a good addition. We can always have that conversation. I don't think the time right now is to, you know, put curb in that whole town. That side of town and stormwater and stuff like that. I know you guys are having other discussions about some other stuff, but just with the scope of this project, it's better to add the curb when you're out there doing the work than not. So it's a good start, in my opinion, to let's get some curb in.
I'm excited about it, for sure.
But that conversation will come up for sure. I mean, there's got to be a starting and stopping point with every project. So, I mean, it's a good, you know, it stops right at that creek channel and gets all the water going that way. So.
Well, and just for the council's interest, what you can't see is where that yellow line is. That's all underneath those trees is where a really deep creek channel is. So it's down, I don't know, probably 20 feet at certain points in depth-wise. So it's a big little channel there that can flood pretty significantly on a bad rain. So I think this will be a huge help.
And also adding the slip lining pipe usually increases the capacity for the water that can move through that pipe. It's slick, it doesn't have the rigidness, so it's just a smoother flow. So it usually increases the capacity of what that creek channel can take, so it's also a good...
Even though it's a smaller IB?
Yes. It's just super slick, it's smooth, and just nothing gets caught in it, so it just moves that water way quicker. So it usually increases the capacity of the storm sewer system also. So moving forward with that, I am asking for $28,179.50. That covers design, cost estimation, helping with bidding, and coming up with quantities, survey work, and just finding the best solution to how to get that water moving downhill in the right direction the easiest way possible.
And so that's just for the the bid, not the project,
Yes.
and design, not the
Yes.
project.
Yep, that's just for designing. Also, the slip line pipe is a bid alternate, so even if the funds aren't there to do the creek crossing, we can still, you know, get the CMP out of the ground and fix the sinkholes and stuff like that. So there's some grading issues that come into effect there, adding curb and putting that stuff underground, going from open ditch to underground storm sewer. So that's somewhat where that cost jumps a little bit. And retiring the existing storm sewer line under the road and trying to keep it in the right of way and out from under the street. So there's some costs in there too for that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
You want to put this on that consent?
No, I think we'll talk about that.
I think it should be discussed now.
Has there been any bid to get a different bid possibly? I mean, 30 grand just seems like a lot for, just for the, maybe it's not, but for the surveying and pricing of this project. I don't know.
I mean, that's the drawings and everything, so they're surveying, they're coming up with elevations and quantities and getting the boxes designed. They're all custom built to fit on the street and curb and, you know, could be some right-of-way acquisition or temporary easement stuff for yard grading and getting that stuff underground, so.
So the answer to your question is no. We went to one of our on-call engineers to prepare the scope and fee for that. It does not feel or seem to be out of line with projects that we've done over the last, 4 years or with other engineers. And so we try to, move those back and forth and ask those questions, but it wasn't anything that raised a red flag from our perspective on that cost.
Any idea on what this?
How many times have I asked Brent that question?
Yeah, I'm not gonna throw a number out there because,
Throw it, Brent, throw it.
I'm not gonna throw it out there because I mean.
Can you throw me in at least?
Do you remember what this Woodson project cost?
Is it at least 200?
I wouldn't say. I'd say under 200 for sure.
Okay.
The Woodson and then the 51st, I think was, you might be able to, it was like 160,
Okay.
somewhere in that ballpark, I think, and that was the Woodson, and then we did the Stormwater on 51st too, where the sidewalk was caving in. So those two projects were tied together, but I could find those numbers for you if you need them too. So.
That's the cost for the actual project, or is it for the design also?
That was the cost for the actual project, for those two projects, was around 160. That wasn't the design cost, that was a separate cost.
Okay.
And I wasn't part of that design cost phase, so I really don't have numbers for that for you.
Thank you.
But yeah, we can look it up.
Thank you. All right, so looks like we'll be going ahead and putting on that, the non-consent then.
Thank you, Brent.
Appreciate it, thanks for the time.
Thanks for all your work on that. Okay, it looks like the next item is just department updates, correct? Laura's good.
One more item.
Rock Creek Channel design and financing, very quickly.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So last month, we've been talking about the Rock Creek Channel behind the former Mission Bowl site, and as it relates to the Rolling Court Homes Association and the subsidence in their parking lot. So we've got CID on that project moving forward. We've talked last month, the last couple of months, about really kind of a need to move that project in its entirety forward if we can do that. We preliminarily talked about and looked at some financing and how we might be able to do that without the SMAC participation. And one of the things that I committed to at that December meeting was sitting down with the folks from SMAC and talking to them about the options. I did have a meeting with Kent Lage and Lee Kellenberger, who work with the SMAC program at Johnson County before Christmas, and was very encouraged. They certainly can't commit to anything, but they felt as if our project would potentially be funded through SMAC in 2020. We are at the bottom of the list, but they felt like some of the other cities ahead of us, or through that process as we look at putting the 2020 budget together, that the funding might reach that far down the list and encompass ours, which would put $3.1 million of other people's money back on the table, which is a very significant accomplishment. We won't have that process finalized until the county goes through their whole formal budget process, but the first look at that is coming up at a SMAC meeting on February 1st. So we'll be attending that meeting and kind of looking at and understanding. Probably the biggest unknown in that process is new preliminary engineering studies are due to SMAC by January 18th. So they don't, for 2020 projects, so they don't necessarily know what new might be coming in the door. But we had a very productive, I think, positive conversation around this project, the opportunities to receive funding, and what they said is in other situations they have looked at, while we wouldn't enter into the formal interlocal agreement, we would be able to secure some sort of written agreement that we would proceed 100% at our cost, anticipating that reimbursement in 2020. So we could still proceed with the construction in the 2019 year. So we've kind of slowed down on the design contract. Before we are back together as a committee in February, we will have been through that SMAC meeting, and I hope to be able to bring back to you at that point some more conclusive decision points as we look to that, and I hope that one of them will include being able to take advantage of that SMAC funding to move that project forward, because I think that's certainly what we would like to see happen. I think would be the most efficient for the property owners in that area as well as for the city.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, great. Any other discussion on that? Okay, now, finally, department updates. Flora Smith.
I don't think we have anything this evening.
Is there anything on that noise complaint at all?
I have not, no, not yet.
All right, with that, that concludes the CDC meeting at before 7:30. Great. It's all yours, Nick.
All right, so we'll go ahead and kick off our Finance Administration Committee for January 9th. I do have to leave at about 8:30, so if it runs any longer than that, we have to have Ken help finish up. Really hard with that. I have to leave with Nick. You got to pick up your dogs by a certain time? No, all right, so we'll go ahead and get started. First up tonight, we have an action item on the ordinance establishing the Rolling Court Townhomes Community Improvement District. The CID is Laura was referring to.
Yes, thank you. So you, as you may recall, in December, you passed a resolution which authorized and called a public hearing on the creation of the Rolling Court Homes Association Community Improvement District for your January 16th City Council meeting. So we are scheduled to hold that public hearing. You have the opportunity, if you're ready, to also then create the district, take the step to create the district, which is done via ordinance. So we put a draft ordinance on your agenda just so you would have an opportunity to look at that. Based on some conversations, and I don't see anybody from Rolling Court here, they weren't sure they were going to be able to get here. We have been working with them over the last month and a half or so to look at, I think we've got a draft agreement put together, a reciprocal agreement with the City, Johnson County Wastewater, and the Rolling Court Homes Association that sort of says we won't go back against one another through the midst of this process. That was an important piece for the Homes Association, also important for us with a $330,000 wastewater bill that is out there. So that document is almost finalized. It would eventually come back, obviously, to the City Council. We're also working on a development agreement. One of the things that the Homes Association has talked about off and on is having an interest at the time we go in and do construction about making improvements to all of the parking area that serves the townhomes, not just that area that was disrupted as a result of the subsidence. It's a little bit of a tricky chicken and an egg horse cart situation because in the CID petition we've had to set a maximum annual assessment per property. That did not include those additional improvements to the parking area. We weren't sure what those would cost. We weren't sure exactly what they wanted to do. We weren't sure, obviously until we actually go out to bid, you don't know whether you have enough built into your existing budget to accommodate that. We spent a little bit of time over the last 2 weeks working with GBA to understand the Homes Association's request and to do some preliminary cost estimating about a mill and overlay for the west portion of the parking lot. So I've shared those numbers with the Homes Association. I think that they need to take that back to their board and to their membership because it increases that annual assessment to a point where I think they may not be comfortable with that. So they're continuing to explore some options. At this point, and we'll know more next week, I think they will have had the opportunity to circulate some of that information through their membership. What we may want to do, and I'll be clear as we go through the public hearing process, if they want to adjust the maximum annual percentage, we would have to file a new CID petition. Not a big deal. We would just call a public hearing at another time and move that forward. We can't, but we couldn't take advantage of that existing petition. So we may not want to adopt this ordinance yet at this point. So we've already got the public hearing call, but again, we'll have more information on that process. It's kind of a continual work in progress as we move this forward. And if we can accommodate that now and their membership is willing to submit that revised petition, I think that makes the most sense as we make the final decisions about design.
So still move forward with the public hearing?
Still moving forward with the public hearing.
Probably not an ordinance?
Probably not the ordinance. And you don't have to take action on the ordinance the same night as the public hearing. You can, but it's not a requirement of a creation of the CID.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Sounds good. So we'll start our public hearing?
Yes, we'll start the public hearing on the 16th.
We'll probably not have an ordinance this time around.
Let me have one. Nope, I kept one.
All right, and the next item is update on the 2019 legislative program. I know Laura's going to update on that. I just wanted to make a comment about this one quick before we get too deep into it. This isn't anything that we're asking staff to spend any time on right now or really work on any of this stuff. This is just formalizing positions that I guess the city might agree with for the upcoming state legislative session. So with that in mind, there's no teeth behind any of this. There's no action that we're asking them to take place on any of these things. So let's maybe keep that in mind in the interest of time when discussing some of these items if possible. But anyway.
So let me kind of set the table a little bit and then share with you what I passed out this from the time the packet went out till this evening. I've done a little reorganization of the same priorities. So following our discussion in December, I sent out an email, asked the council to kind of give me any feedback or direction on the items to be included in the 2019 legislative program. The feedback that I received in general, there was general support to continue with the 2018 program, sort of forming the foundation for 2019. So in your packet is the 2018 program that has had a few changes. So you'll see the red line changes to that 2018 program to reflect our starting position for 2019. So I would suggest that we'll kind of work our way through this. The changes that I made there were based on looking at, in the past we've had this joint city-county legislative platform and program that we've adopted. That did not occur this year, but some of the other cities have adopted their legislative programs. And so some of this cleanup is to make our language look consistent, because part of what we want to have is a consistent voice on some of these issues. So a lot of these changes are really taken from either the county's program or some of the other cities to kind of provide some clarity and prove that. So there's nothing from a substantive standpoint in any of the red line changes in this 2019 program that changes our position on any of those policies from the previous year. So as we move forward, what I might suggest is that we kind of, if we can, quickly move through this, see if there are any questions, general agreement on, do we believe that this should form the base? If so, then what I've done is we also asked for anyone who had other issues or policies that they would like to see included in the 2019 program to submit those. Those were the policies that were outlined in the separate memorandum that was provided. And I did inadvertently leave one of Hillary's items off of the list. So I have added it to the handout, the handout that I provided to you this evening. So one of the things is I've gone through the agenda review process earlier this week and been in conversation, was trying to say there's a lot. There were a lot of new policies included on that list. And so is there a way for us to provide some guidance or to sort of characterize those and give you some opportunities to think about maybe what is a priority or what may or may not already be included in this base program. So I've tried to reorganize those, and when we get through the base program, I'll kind of walk through and wanted you to have this handout, which is organized in a little bit different fashion than the memorandum in your packet. And I think it'll be a more efficient way for us to get through those conversations. But we will really be looking for whichever council member suggested a particular item or policy to kind of share their perspective, why they thought it was important to include for 2019, and then we're going to be looking for kind of just a general thumbs up, thumbs down approach to what we add to this 2019 program, and then that would move forward to your city council agenda next week on the 16th. So with that, I would look to see first if we have any comment, discussion on the 2019 legislative program that's been redlined in your packet.
Now, just one point of clarity, this just gets published on the website and that's pretty much it, right?
We do mail it. In the past, we have mailed it to our legislators. And I think if there have been council members who have attended the League's government days, which are coming up, I believe, the 23rd of January. Is that right? That they've taken, this has been available, they can take that and provide that in conversations that they've had.
And Laura, we've also had discussions about possibly having an event with the reps, the state reps that cover mission, right? In which case we would discuss these items.
Right, so I think there was, in December, there was some conversation about some interest in doing something a little bit more formally as a part of that, so.
Well, I think what was already redlined from our 2018, I think that all looked good to me, and that's my suggestion. Move ahead with at least that section.
Okay.
Depending on whoever loses.
Sounds good.
Okay, so then we start into, I didn't keep one of those. There you go. So then, in the memorandum, I had organized several of the policies at the top where there were multiple council people who had suggested this. And the one that I handed out this evening, I have taken some of those and a couple of others and have moved those to the top and would say that those are policies, these are policies that staff would specifically recommend for inclusion in the 2019 program. Because I've had the opportunity to look at what the other cities and really understand these and look at those. I think that the conversation around alternative property valuation, particularly that dark store theory, is an important one. The amendment, and I've put these in alphabetical order because it's just easier for my brain to process them. The amendment of the Kansas Act Against Discrimination and the increase in the minimum age for sale and purchase of tobacco products. As we've gone through the adoption of the non-discrimination ordinance and had the conversation in December about Tobacco 21, we heard a very common theme that said if we need to be advocating at the state level for changes in these things. So if that is how we feel, I think it is staff's perspective that we ought to put those in our legislative program and advocate for those at the state level. So that's why those are included there. Internet sales.
Are we wanting to discuss this now, or are you just going?
I'm going to go through just these quick ones, and then we'll kind of come back and say, do you have concerns with anything in this section? Internet sales tax collection, and that's just a revenue opportunity that we could be missing. And then energy efficiency is really a statement taken from the League's position. That supports public and private incentives to encourage energy efficiency by local governments and citizens. So those are the ones from that list that I would say from our standpoint as a staff we would recommend the council consider including. So let's go through those and see how we feel about those, and then we can move into the next section.
One of the things that was brought up at the National League of Cities on the committee that I sit on, which is Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources, is every year I bring up the option of going back and looking at the energy efficiency block grants. They were very successful when they first portrayed them about 5 years ago, and they dropped off the screen. And I'm kind of interested in seeing if those go back on, so I will bring it up again in March in DC.
Okay.
I don't know if the state has anything like that or has had anything like that.
They don't.
I know there's federal stuff for that. But
it is, it's federal, but the state kind of, they don't get involved in stuff like that. So the city kind of have to pick up what they don't.
Well, and I think that's part of the statewide energy policy. That was another piece of it, because that could be an element that's included in the statewide energy policy.
Okay, so let's go through these alternative property valuations. Is there anybody who would not like to see that included? Are we okay to include that in the 2019 program?
And that's one that's currently in the finance taxation section.
Yes.
The business.
And this is a little bit more, I changed the language here from the league's position to match up with some language that's included in Johnson County's state platform for 2019. Again, trying to mirror and mimic the language or the message that's being sent by our own county appraiser as a part of that process. So yes, okay. Amendment to the Kansas Act Against Discrimination. So essentially what that is saying is that we encourage the state to look at changing the state statutes to protect against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity at the state level rather than pushing that down and requiring that through the adoption of local ordinances. Yes? Okay. Same thing on the increase in the minimum age for sale. So the city would support a statewide policy which would increase the minimum age in sale. Again, where should that decision, if we're making that decision, where should that decision be made?
I'd be all for the state considering increasing the actual legal age of majority, but I don't think I'm definitely not in agreement with this one, but you know, if it's on our legislative resolution, it doesn't really mean anything too serious anyway, so.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm gonna fight this hard. I hate it, but I'm not gonna.
Well, that was one that I recommended, and Hillary has supported on the basis of our discussion. And I know we were at an impasse in our discussion, and one of the reasons why it was not voted on or not moved forward was that the argument was that it should be done at the state level.
And I think the argument that was made pretty clearly from what I understood was that maybe the age of adulthood should be at the state level if we're going to make changes to that. But,
and I had a slightly different interpretation.
Sure.
So I didn't include tobacco 21 because I assumed that Ken would, but not to jump ahead, but in other, on the back, you'll see increase in tobacco sales tax. I included that because that is something that comes up at the state semi-regularly and seemed like something that everyone seemed to be more on board with. So that is something
proven to be more effective.
Well, all of these are part of tobacco prevention.
The amendment,
I mean, that's really what the focus is. It's all about prevention. And so when RC asked, what does prevention look like? This is what prevention looks like.
yeah. So the one before there, the amendment to the Kansas Act Against Discrimination, we've already passed an ordinance for that. So of course we support that. We want the state to look at it. Kind of wish the state would have looked at it first rather than us. Yeah, it's not something we should have. However, it's not the same with the 21-year-old purchasing tobacco thing. We haven't done anything at the city level on that yet. The city hasn't decided how we feel about that. So why would we tell the state that we have?
Well, and I think that's the question. I think the question is, I heard a lot of conversation around the tobacco 21 similar to the amendments to the Act Against Discrimination about let's encourage this to happen at the state level as opposed to the local level.
If it's going to happen,
so there, I think what I'm hearing tonight is there's two pieces of this, and one is at what level the decision is made, and in this instance, it's also the age of majority, or there's related to that, right? I mean, is that a fair characterization?
Like if it's going to happen, it makes a lot more sense for it to happen at the state level. Just me personally, I don't like it either way. But, I'm not going to fight a big battle trying to deal with the state level on that. I also don't know that they have any intention to even look at this. So.
But I also want to be clear.
I don't think us putting it in our legislative agenda is going to really push anyone at the state to look at it. Maybe it will.
Well, it was actually brought up at the Chambers Legislative Forum and potential for discussions maybe coming up. So I mean, I think this has value. I think this is the reason why we're doing this. And so much of our conversations, I feel like, especially in the past few months, have been, as Laura said, focused on we need to be advocating for this at the state level. And I think this is our opportunity to do so.
So that we all kind of agree that this should be handled at the state level.
I want to make it clear that by my adding this or putting it on this list does not mean that we're not going to discuss this in the future.
So you don't think it should be be handled?
I believe that it should be handled either both here and at the state.
He's saying if it doesn't go through at the state, it's still gonna come back here for discussion.
We still have agreed.
Yeah, we've
We're
agreed
gonna
to have a
have a
discussion, we'll have the
discussion
discussion on it.
session.
Right, sure. Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, so in the effort of getting through the rest of the priorities on this one, generally, I've heard 2 no's to not have it included in the 2019 program.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know how you do that.
Yes?
Yes,
He supports a statewide policy, that's what you just said. You
No, I know, but
want.
I think the issue for Nick and Pat, if I'm understanding, is the 21 years of age.
Right.
Right, not who regulates. Okay, so that one will not be specifically included in the 2019 program.
No, excuse me. I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, it will be. Yes, it will be. It will be
Please.
included. My math is bad at this time of day. Internet sales tax collection,
That one's great.
good. Energy efficiency. The next section of this memorandum are items that we, from a staff perspective, feel are either already implicit in the opening statement. So if you look at the opening statement in our legislative program, it really sort of couches everything in terms of, while we respect the state government's role, we continue to advocate for protection of home rule authority and local control, particularly of revenue and spending, but really decision-making in the more general sense. So as we looked at some of the other items that had been submitted, I tried to look at those that I think are really implicitly included in that desire to preserve home rule and local authority, or those where there's not a lot of conversation around the issue, and so using our chips, spending our chips on that particular item may or may not be something that we want to do, particularly because I think we do have a statement in the introductory letter in the legislative program that talks about, in general, that we support all of the positions included in the League of Kansas Municipalities Statement of Municipal Policy. So that sort of blanket covers everything that would be here. So body cameras is there. Again, it's a decision of local law enforcement agencies to decide how they use those body cameras. Cooperation with KDOT. We do have something in the program that's talking about funding, T-Works funding, comprehensive transportation plan, and doing agenda review. I think I came to understand that this was submitted by Councilmember Davis. I think this may have to do as much with maintenance of the right-of-ways and notification of residents when projects were being done. I think many of you were contacted when China Mission Park was being repaved, and the residents were working overnight and hadn't given a lot of notice to the residents. So if that's the case, I think that we may want to change that language. If that's the message that we're trying to communicate, I'm not sure that this policy or this plank as identified here
Yeah, I think this was
communicates
taken
that.
from the
It was taken from the leagues.
And so I interpreted it that way, and so I would be fine with whatever way you want to go forward on this one.
So I think it's
probably too narrow.
It's probably too narrow, and it may be something that we just draft a letter specifically to KDOT that expresses those concerns and sends that to the agency as opposed to the legislative program. So we can certainly do that. Installation of elected officials. This again came from the leagues. This is straight out of the leagues program, but I think that, you know, we've got a plank about nonpartisan elections. If we want to be specific about timing of installation of elected officials, I honestly haven't had any or heard any conversation really around that, so I don't know that it's necessary to include that in our program.
That one even came up, but it doesn't.
It was in the league's program.
And it says separate from state and national elections, so it wouldn't be November, it would be back to spring.
No, this is just about installation of people that have already been elected.
Yeah, we've already been through the whole, we're going to switch to the November election cycle.
There was some confusion around the installation when they changed the date.
That was also the first time.
So the transition year, and I do know there was some, so you had to make a decision, you either extended terms or shortened terms, and so that may have been a result of that. So are we okay leaving this off? Okay. Land use and zoning, I think that one is very clear from, at least from my perspective or my read, that local, home rule and local control and authority and land use and zoning issues is paramount. So if we want to reiterate it, I think we can. I don't know that it's necessary to do so, so we'll look for guidance on that.
I'm okay with it.
Okay? Same thing with law enforcement and public safety. Again, it just reiterates that we want to be able to make those decisions.
And I have no objection to any of those.
Okay? And then budget timeline, it's great, I would love it, I would cheerlead it for it all day long, it's probably never gonna happen. And so I think it's one where we almost, our voice gets lost because there's nobody else joining in. Okay, so coming out of that, protection of the First Amendment, again.
I thought that was also, you didn't note it here, but duplicative of our preserve the ability to advocate and educate that's already in the platform, covers the same subject matter.
Revitalization tools and then tax increment financing, which is the one down. I think if there's an interest for us to go back and more specifically identify things like the Neighborhood Revitalization Act or community improvement districts in the section that we already have included on preserving local authority in the use of economic development tools, I think we would more than adequately cover that piece. So if it's important for us to specifically talk about certain programs, I think we can add that to the language that exists in our 2019 program.
I think the one that's a big one is the sales tax exemption on building equipment, building material.
That's already in our...
So we've got that in our policy. That's retain the local government sales tax exemption. So that one's there. The other one was sales tax exemption. And the question about whether, I think if we wanted to be more specific, there is some of that in the tax policy section in the existing platform or program. If we wanted to be a little bit more specific, I would suggest that we add that language under the tax policy section in our current program.
I think that's a good solution.
Okay.
Can I go back just a minute? The lead policy on elections is very specific. It doesn't talk about installation. We've added that. Look at under government policy.
We're not going to put it in.
I understand that, but what is on this page and what is in the policy by the league are two separate issues.
Are you saying you want that one added, the installation of?
No, why do you get installation? Installation has nothing to do with the
We're not going to do anything, we're leaving it up. It's not going to, just cross it out, it's not going to be there. You convinced us.
So revitalization tools, sorry, I think we kind of half jumped over that one. Were we going to add to our existing platform or leave it?
So let me go back. Let's close the loop on this. So if you look at page 16 of the league's statement of policy, it is installation of elected officials. So it did that, right?
Yeah, you're repeating that one, but not the first one, which is it should be separate from national.
Right, well that wasn't suggested because we have...
It didn't work anyway.
Yeah,
we just have the general statement of support for the leagues.
Yes. You didn't have, the only thing that you had, excuse me, in your 2018 program specifically talked about, well, no, it was partisan. Well, we said, and so maybe the heading is not accurate, because in that section in our current plan, maintain nonpartisan local elections, we say the city supports local elections remaining separate from state and national elections, and we are opposed to any legislation which would require local elections to be partisan. So I don't know, maybe it makes more sense to take the nonpartisan.
We had that caveat in here before we went to the different elections.
Right, but just because we had the city of Mission's position doesn't mean the state's going to adopt that.
Yeah, so I think it's fine to leave it how we have it, but it includes both parts.
There's no city in Johnson County that wants the elections held as the national ones. Go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I wish we could move back to the spring, but I don't know that the state has any appetite to do that. All we're doing here is we're taking a position saying we wish you would.
Yeah, okay, got it.
That's really it.
Okay.
Okay, so do you want me to specifically name the economic development tools under...
Is that, what's the, I thought that was taken from from the league.
That is taken, so both the revitalization tools and the tax increment finance are taken from the leagues. I have said, I've tried to suggest where I think they would fit, or where they're in.
I was in agreement with
Yep.
that.
Yeah, I'd be okay with combining it.
Okay.
That way we show we support those programs.
Okay, and then sales tax exemption, do we have general consensus that we want to include that, incorporate that language as a part of the tax policy statement in the program?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess my question is, how will that play out in regards to eliminating sales tax on food?
Well, if you take this policy at its face value, you're in some
I
respect.
don't think that's on there first.
What? No, go ahead.
I think that's not on there for a specific reason, but, right?
There's some conversation around that, and I will tell you in the county's legislative program, their language.
Would a reduction or elimination on sales tax on food include restaurants, if you're mission? Just curious.
Good, I think, my understanding is that it can be written in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, different states
Not
do it
just
differently.
Many states have it on non-prepared foods.
Yeah.
Correct. See if I can find this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Ken. I think in light of that, I'd say maybe just leave what we have for tax policy and not add this additional part.
So what the county says, just as you think about it, because I think this is going to be an ongoing topic, I think at the Chamber's legislative breakfast, we heard some of the state legislators talk about that look, but in the county's legislative platform, they've said that they support the state reviewing incremental reduction of sales tax on food and pharmaceuticals while taking fair and full consideration of other state program funding needs. So it may be, you may want to take a more generic position on sales tax exemptions.
I'd say maybe just leave what we had from last year,
Okay.
not add.
Yes, no?
Yes.
I'm with it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just sorry.
Okay, so that leaves us under that first section then, weapons and firearms, and this is the one that was Hillary's that I inadvertently left off. So the suggestion is the city supports the ability of local governments to set policies regarding the carrying of weapons and firearms by municipal employees while they are engaged at work. So this is specific to an organization's ability to regulate their own employees while at work.
Well, I know that we do have some language in the 2018 one that talks about firearms being in municipal buildings. It's not specific to employees. So I'd be fine with just adding potentially some language to the 2018 about it affecting employees and us being able to regulate city vehicles. Although that's listed in the 2018, we don't mention employees.
We actually had specific discussion about that exact thing last year when this came up, and deliberately had that left off last year. Just, I think that was a big sticking point. It was a big discussion topic that came up.
To me, I feel like the HR piece is as important as the public safety piece,
Well,
because the league has both listed. The
If they're
league
in a
has,
municipal building, that would cover them anyway, wouldn't it?
No.
You can legally carry a gun in a municipal building unless they've got it set up to not allow guns, meaning they'd have to actually have metal detector and stuff.
Yes.
Like the
I
courthouse.
was referring to the policy that you talked about from 2018 about carrying weapons in municipal buildings.
Right, we deliberately took that off of our stance last year.
The part about employees is what you're saying.
Yes.
So I'm still in favor of leaving that off.
and again, I think it's important to note that it's not taking a position. It's, to me, us having the ability to regulate whether our employees can carry firearms or not. I think it's very important. And it comes back to home rule, so it really, whether it goes in or not, it's not a huge deal.
How does it tie in with what we've agreed to, which is restore local gun control?
Yeah, I mean, that would be encompassed in local control, but.
The city supports the local regulation of firearms and weapons. We believe that the local government should have the ability to regulate and enforce possession and use of weapons within the city-owned facilities, including City Hall, etc. And you're saying that this adds the employee's ability to carry firearms.
I think it adds our ability as...
To control.
Exactly.
But if that's not there, what's our authoritarian position with employees?
It falls under the state.
If it falls under the state statute.
That's why we had to take it out of our employee handbook.
The tricky
this
thing
year,
though
last month.
is gun licensing happens at a state level.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen at a city level. Just like your driver's license that you get to operate a car, you don't have to get a driver's license for each city that you want to drive your car.
But the question, I guess I'm interpreting this is the ability of the city to regulate its employees while they're at work, carrying or not carrying firearms.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think we should just take a vote on it. We discussed it at length last year and didn't want to.
I'd like the chief's opinion, if you're willing to at least talk about that.
So the rule years ago is that you couldn't. Now it's my understanding, I haven't been there recently, but it's my understanding that employees, if Brent wants to carry a gun in the truck in Public Works, while he's working,
Right.
that he is allowed to do that. So, but
Your employees all carry them, right?
I'm good with that.
Well, I think it goes back to local control. I think it's paired with the one that we've already agreed to. It's just a matter of regulating when they're on duty, employees, what's the...
Sure.
Well, I think that's what he just talked about with Brent. Like if Brent wanted to carry
Yeah,
one while he was on duty, is that...
That we're advocating that we, as a local home rule, could rule on whether the city has a policy to allow it.
But who would approve it, the governing body or his supervisor?
The state would still have to make a change to the state law for any of this stuff to matter anyway. They're not going to make any changes in it. Or maybe they will, who knows. But us putting this in our legislative agenda is probably not going to lead to someone at the state picking this up and running with it.
Okay.
Like, we are not making any changes to anything by passing anything on this legislative agenda.
So this is all just
we're just
pointless
saying,
to you.
I'm not saying it's pointless, but all we're really doing, just to be clear, is we're saying, hey,
carry your weapon with
state, these are the things we would like you to consider. That's it. That's really all we're doing.
Yes, since you're chair of this committee, why don't you put it up for a vote and let's see how it goes?
Well, that's what I just suggested. Why don't we vote on whether or not we want this one included?
Sounds good.
I don't
Hillary?
think it's necessary.
Yes.
I think it's yours, Sollie?
Sure, yes.
Ken?
Yes.
I'm going to stay with the same language we had before.
Okay.
I agree with Kristin.
I agree with
I would like to keep it the same as well, so we will not have that one.
Okay, the next section that we try to include really then moves into those things which are more social or human services. That's kind of how I categorize those. The first one of those was investment in the social safety net.
Yeah, I put this one in. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about the co-responder program and a lack of mental health services and how that does have an impact on our public safety and policing. And so I thought that taking a position as a city that we would like to see those services supported so that it doesn't have a negative, trickle-down impact in our communities, that was important.
I think it's state level, not state level.
Not what? Is there a typo?
State level.
It's just a little typo.
Oh, I see. At the state level,
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that.
And Sioux County just approved the new.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew for Leewood and Prairie Village, so hopefully, Chief, are you feeling optimistic that we'll have more response?
we actually have interviews next week.
Okay, perfect. Love it.
Okay, Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
Yeah, I also put that one in sort of for the same reason, healthy communities. We talked a lot about cities of all ages supporting all of our residents. I thought it fit in with that.
Yes?
Plus, we're turning away federal dollars.
Yeah.
Exactly. A lot.
Moderate income housing program.
I included that one. Although missions never receive these funds are funds that are allocated every year in the total of about $2 million to different communities around Kansas, smaller communities. And I think or at least I've read a lot about affordable housing becoming increasingly difficult in Johnson County. And so I just think advocating, whether Mission or any city in Johnson County ever got these dollars, I think just advocating for low and moderate income housing is helpful at the state level, because it's becoming increasingly difficult for moderate income families to afford to live in Johnson County.
I'm good with that.
Yep. Substance abuse prevention and treatment.
Yeah, this was also me. This was of my own creation based on some of our discussions around Tobacco 21. So we talked a lot about the tobacco settlement dollars that are supposed to go to tobacco prevention programs, not going to those programs in Kansas. And also, the criminalization. I think Debbie raised, issues with addiction as being a bigger societal problem, and that we're treating this as a criminal issue, and that there's some sort of other failing in our social structure. And so that was why I came up with this, to say, allocating our dollars appropriately and then treating this as a public health issue.
Yeah, I think we have the DARE program, but this extends beyond that age group that the DARE program targets. So I think it's good.
Okay. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we had an additional one, I think this was straight from the League's platform as well, regarding alternative energy sources and our support of the use of alternative and renewable energy sources, and providing incentives to take advantage of this one.
Yeah, and I did as well, I think.
And if we were really diligent in our position, we would talk about Kansas as the second state in the country for wind generation. That could be a creative dream for the state to take on that for revenue purposes.
And I think we're 4th for solar or something too. So yeah, I'm with Debbie. If you can find what that figure is and add that would be great.
I also learned that there's a new wind generating without propeller.
Really?
It's a vibratory. It's something that the wind vibrates.
Cool.
So we'll have less birds.
Less birds, maybe.
Okay, then in the other category, we touched on this briefly, but an increase in tobacco sales tax being a deterrent to tobacco use.
Yeah, basically that's again a prevention. I added that one. It's a way to prevent youth and others from starting smoking. The proposals have come forward for $1.50 tobacco sales tax, and it's almost passed a couple times, and certainly when they're looking for revenue, this is one thing.
So, yes?
I included this one as well. Yeah, I support those.
Then they'll discover Missouri.
No,
I know. I used to go to Missouri all the time.
So are we okay with including this one? On the increase in the tax?
Sure.
Okay. Legalization of marijuana.
Yeah, so that was also me. I think if you look at the dollars, that it makes a lot of sense. We've talked about everything being cash strapped. We've talked about mental health services. We've talked about roads. And I think it would be, if you look at the Colorado numbers, it's a great opportunity for revenue for our state.
Well, you've got two things. One, you're talking about just marijuana, but in that paragraph, you talk about they should at least adopt medical, while medical deals with the next paragraph. So
they were submitted separately. So Sollie submitted one and Hillary submitted the other.
I submitted medical, and I support, not because I don't support the first, but because I think it's actually going to come up at the state level this year.
Well,
and that's why I included it.
I could go with the bottom one. I'm really not in favor of
I'm with Sollie on this, like,
I would.
Money, right?
We don't have enough social.
I mean, yeah.
I'm going with both of them.
Well, I think so my view on that is that the first one encompasses the second one. So I think, in my view, we would vote on the first one first, and if there isn't support for the full legalization, then we would vote on the medical only, would be my take.
I wonder if Ben...
Chief
has some thoughts.
He's going to recuse himself.
I understand, and this is all chief and professional. I've seen what marijuana can do. I've seen fatality accidents. I've seen people that are on marijuana and other drugs that have kids, and I've seen it on the front lines. I know John Arnett's seen it on the front lines. It's not good. I do know people in the states that have legalized it, and from the front line, it's not good. Okay, if the state legalizes it, I understand, but the other thing I want to point out is if we want to support legislation, the legalization of marijuana, and then we just talked about substance abuse prevention and treatment.
Exactly.
Right.
We want to help treat and prevent it, but yet we want to legalize marijuana. It's just, it's going both ways. That's my comment.
I agree.
I would support the chiefs.
Me too.
I was high when I got here. No, I'm just kidding, I wasn't right.
You're high on life.
But I'm definitely against that legalization of marijuana.
Now the medical,
Medical's okay.
Do we want to have to
Further
vote on the first one and then?
So let's vote.
on the
So
second?
do we have support to include the first one?
No.
Okay. Support to include the second one.
I'll support the first one.
So we have.
Okay, so I think
we
I think we've got it pretty split.
So who's voting yes on the first
Raise your
one?
hand.
Okay. We got 4.
So it's 4 to 3.
Yeah,
So it's passes.
Yeah, I did. I think there's an awful lot of resources spent in trying to fight it that don't need to be spent trying to fight it. I don't think having it illegal has proven to be effective in preventing people from using and buying and selling and trafficking marijuana. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
So
I would imagine
if it's
Chief
good or
Addy,
bad, you regulate it and it's okay, then it's better?
if you regulate it and you tax it, I think it's a better approach than actually trying to just
People can
outlaw
just get
it.
more then.
They already do though, that's the thing, right?
I don't know how we
There's
can
still
measure.
a lot of
I do
data
think
coming in about
that
what's
it's
going on in Colorado.
inconsistent.
No.
It's not good
Well,
stuff.
the thing is, there is
Isn't that
not
higher
a
accident
single
rates?
documented.
We do have a huge problem in this country.
Okay, so right now, with what we agreed to, it's going to go on. I imagine there will be more discussion to ensue next week.
So yes, and then
Yes,
the
and
second
then
one is redundant.
Is redundant because it's included in the first one. So we've added 12 new issues to our legislative program.
You asked for it.
I did ask for it, so I have one remaining question, but I think we got through that relatively efficiently.
Good job. This is really helpful, Laura.
And we will start this process earlier next year.
Yeah, I do think that one of the things that we should do on our retreat is to talk a little bit about what do we see as a scope of what our council ordinances are, what's typically within scope, what's outside scope. Because I think some of our debates that we've had, and I know that Nick and I have gone back and forth on a couple of these, that it's helpful for us to have that conversation in terms of the principles by which we're going to look at bringing forward recommended ordinances.
So the only question I have is I kind of reformat the program and incorporate these into this. We have some options. One of the things we talked about in December is then if we end up with a fairly long list of policies and priorities, do we want to bump any of those up or indicate that any of those are higher priorities? I will tell you that some cities do that. The county, for example, indicates first and second tier issues. I don't know that that's necessary, but that's certainly something that we could consider. I would suggest, and I would like to go back and reorganize with the things that we've added to create groupings so that there's more continuity as someone might read through this program and just understanding that. So at a minimum, I would do that, but is there any appetite for?
You know, I think maybe for next year, if we're going to undertake this, maybe we spend some more time up front and work towards that. I don't know if it's worth a whole lot of time.
I think they're all first tier issues.
Okay.
I think subject matter grouping makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
for this
sure,
year.
sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Just trying to prioritize things at this point.
Well,
And I don't know who's going to local government day, but I'd like to take a copy with me and are
Yep.
going.
I'm gonna try to do that.
Right, and pass that along to our local reps and we can share from there.
I also think that it's important for us as a council to come to terms with the concept that city and municipal functions are not just limited to streets and, you know, police ordinances and so on. I do think that there are other aspects of city life that are relevant and are germane to city and good communities. And to say that something belongs in the discussion or doesn't belong in the discussion, that's where I would like to get some principles that we can talk about and say, this is something that certainly fits within the function of the city, whether it's social human service issues or other issues that are not necessarily the sewers and streets and curbs and things like that.
But when you go ahead and they'll do the surveys, we get that back heavily. That's what the residents really care about. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's kind of where I am.
There's definitely other aspects to this job. I mean, we were elected to serve the people of the city, and to Kristin's point, when we get surveys and when we get feedback from the community, it's streets, infrastructure, parks, police. You know, those are the things that come up over and over and over.
I'm not sure that the surveys include things like, you know, social services and access to, you know, public safety and public health needs of the community. So those typically have not been included in those surveys.
We're also a city of 10,000 people with a smaller staff. We're not New York City or anything.
But I'm saying that we have cities that regulate licensure of restaurants in terms of food and safety. We have a lot of different things. Our public safety programs include the DARE program and other aspects. So I'd like to get some definition and some principles by which, and not just dismiss a topic and saying it doesn't belong.
Right. It's just, I think we also have to be mindful of staying in our lane on some things. There's some things that are already handled at other levels, that are handled effectively at other levels, and if we're going to go down the path of spending a lot of time and asking staff to spend time researching and coming up with ordinances and things like that, when it's already being handled elsewhere, I just don't know that that's the best use of our time for people of the city.
Just let me just say one thing relative to what he's talking about. The information and the services provided by Susie Gibbs and the people that do, if you are ever at those and see how many people in this community need help, that's not on our slate to deal with, but that's what we need to be dealing with.
And that does involve people and time and effort to do it.
But I think the point is relevant because I think what we've seen over the last couple of months is it's going to be important for you as the current group of sitting council members to figure out how you resolve. You're all coming at this with some different perspectives and different approaches, and I think that if I'm understanding, you know, part of what I think would be beneficial for all of us is how do we agree to have the conversations, prioritize, move forward, and maintain the relationships, you know, that we have.
Is this something we can explore during the retreat?
That's what I'm suggesting. That's what I'm suggesting.
This isn't really on the agenda for this evening, is it?
Throw that on there.
Fair point.
You can see that?
All right,
so I think I will redraft. I will redraft the legislative program. I'm going to take out the red lines from before, so it's just, we'll have a clean program that we can look at, and we will include that in the packet that goes out on Friday for your consideration next week.
Yeah. So the marijuana will stay in, right?
The first marijuana one is staying in.
I just want to say thank you for organizing this. I know that it was a lot of work.
Well, no, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your feedback and agenda review because it helped me kind of figure out how to kind of structure that a little bit.
Is there anyone recommending that move forward not consent, I'm assuming?
Not consent?
Not consent.
Especially with the changes, we'll want to take a look at that.
Yep.
Can we put that on the regular agenda?
Yeah.
Well, things, I guess Martha's on next.
Nothing that we're doing tonight's going to That's it.
So, okay, each year we present a resolution that just outlines those records that can be destroyed based on state statute. And so,
Don't pour Martha for that. That's exactly what I was going to
Last action item we have tonight is an item on the purchase of computer switches.
Do I get off that easy?
So Brian, I want to hear about these.
Just fine.
All right, fire up the PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
PowerPoint.
He's not kidding.
I got
Wait, this wasn't
other
free
slides in
approved.
here.
I didn't vet this.
Let's go to the first one. So I just wanted to give you an update on, did I send you the wrong one?
Oh, come on. You can only do so much.
That's the phone.
That's the old one from last spring. Anyway.
It's gonna be a really cool PowerPoint.
That's cool.
That's
You're welcome.
technology.
That's gone.
All right.
Yeah, show it on the shelf. And then go on to a couple others.
You want me to run in your office really quick?
No. We'll go through.
We'll muddle through it.
Go on through. Go on.
Okay.
Go on.
Sorry.
I vote yes on that phone.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Do you want us to put it non-consent just so you can show the PowerPoint
Yeah,
next
yeah, really should. All of this is gone. So, we've been working this summer with the
fabulous.
company that
That
we
was not so
hired.
So whose office is it now?
Yeah,
There you go, yeah, right?
it's gonna be the new storage room for the police department.
Yes, if you've seen the chief's office,
Yeah.
he's about up to his eyeballs in storage.
But I wanted to show you was the new data closet that Chief generously gave up upstairs in the training room. It's very nice, it's very slick, and all the wires come together at one point, and they go down the rack into the
Well, maybe we
switches,
should take a
to
tour.
the servers. And
Yeah, there we go.
we have some time to go upstairs after the meeting. So,
Yeah.
anyway, all the cabling for all the buildings is done. They're back this week taking out the old cabling, the old phone system and all that bad wiring and everything. The phone system itself was installed in October. It's working well. And then the surveillance cameras are being installed this week. In fact, you'll see one right there in the corner, and another one over there in the corner. So, we've actually got some of them activated, and we're kind of observing them on the computer screen downstairs in the police department, and it's kept itself is really liking it.
Did you see anybody licking any door?
No, not
Oh my
yet.
gosh.
Has everybody been
Licking
trained on
his
how to
sword?
forward a phone call?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why are you asking
So-
that?
Conference calling and all that good stuff.
So the last part of some of this is the purchase of some new switches.
Switches, right, yeah, so what we kind of discovered in the process is that the switches that we have currently are mostly 100 meg switches,
New pretty cable.
and we're getting 1,000 megabits or 1 gigabyte speed internet service into the building. And when it hits the switch, it's 100 megabits, it kind of defeats utilizing the rest of the technology we have available. The switches were also more or less donated by the county. They were hand-me-down switches from the county, and they are kind of ending their useful life. And then we don't have enough ports for all of the cables for the phones and computers and the cameras and so forth, so we need more ports, physical switches to handle all that. So with that, we had some help from the county putting together a bid specification. We put this out a couple of weeks ago, right before the holidays, for a total of 6 new Cisco switches. We sent this to about 4 or 5 firms, and we got 3 bids back. We are recommending a low bid from Summit Information Resources for $26,700.
Even without seeing the visual representation on the screen, I'm going to recommend we take this again.
All right, I appreciate that.
Just for what it's worth, as a quick, I looked into these switches just to see, and the price is pretty much in line. I mean, maybe if someone bought it from Amazon, you might get it 10% cheaper, but it's pretty much in line at a pretty competitive price. Because I know that they service and
Do you know about Summit and what they're...
They had done some work with the county before, so the county's familiar with them, yeah.
I'd say consider it.
Yep.
Yeah, great.
But you can send us your PowerPoint if you want.
Actually,
I will.
we'll take a tour, since we have 5 minutes left on the...
All right, the last item is any department updates, Laura?
Just a reminder, coffee with a cop on Friday at Hy-Vee.
No, she'll be there.
Other than that, I don't think so.
Well, if there's nothing else, then we can go ahead and adjourn.
Oh my God.
Just before 8:30. Pretty good.
Yeah. Now you can get the dogs.
See you, Liz.
Didn't miss anything, eh?